Every American was told it was for their own good. In 1933, in the darkest years of the Great Depression, the United States government made it a crime for ordinary citizens to own most forms of monetary gold. You had a few weeks to walk into a bank and hand over your gold coins, your bullion, your gold certificates, and accept paper dollars in return. If you refused, you faced up to $10,000 in fines and 10 years in prison, a penalty so extreme that for many families it amounted to a financial death sentence. And then, not long after the last gold had been counted and locked away, the government quietly changed the rules. Overnight, the official price of gold was raised from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. With the stroke of a pen, the government increased the paper value of its gold hoard by billions and devalued every existing dollar in circulation. So, what really happened in the gold confiscation of 1933? Was it an act of national rescue, a desperate attempt to save the economy, or a highly organized transfer of wealth from citizens to the state, wrapped in the language of stability and recovery? To understand why 1933 was even possible, you first have to understand what money was before it. For most of American history, the dollar was not just ink on paper or numbers on a screen. It was a legal promise, a claim on a specific amount of gold. Under the classical gold standard, 1 ounce of gold was officially defined as just over $20. Dollars weren't supposed to float or fluctuate freely. They were tethered to a metal that people believed could not be printed at will. When the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, that tether was reinforced. The Fed was required to hold substantial gold reserves against the notes it issued. On paper, this was prudence. It meant there would always be a pile of metal somewhere backing the paper in people's wallets. In reality, it created a hard limit on how far the financial system could stretch. The Roaring Twenties pushed that limit, credit expanded, speculation exploded, and asset prices soared. When the stock market crashed in 1929 and the economy started to unravel, the system that had seemed so solid suddenly showed its cracks. Banks failed. Businesses collapsed. Unemployment rose like a tidal wave. And as fear spread, people did what frightened people always do. They rushed to safety. Back then, safety didn't mean a money market fund or an index ETF. It meant cash, and for those who understood the system, it meant gold. Bank runs weren't just a demand for paper dollars. They were, implicitly, a demand for redemption. Give me what this promise represents. Give me the gold. That was the problem. Because as demand for safety rose, the underlying gold supply didn't magically expand. The Federal Reserve couldn't simply create gold to match the panic. Its ability to create new money was chained to the metal sitting in vaults. The gold standard, which had made the system look trustworthy in the good times, now acted like a straitjacket in the bad. By early 1933, the United States was trapped between two fears. While on one side, mass unemployment, collapsing banks, and a population rapidly losing faith in the system. On the other, the legal and psychological constraint of gold, the promise that dollars could be turned into something real. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt entered the White House in March 1933, he faced a banking system on the brink. Within days, he declared a national banking holiday, shutting down the banks temporarily. At the same time, Congress rushed through emergency legislation that gave the president vast power over gold and currency, using an old wartime law as the legal foundation. Officially, the narrative was simple. The country was suffering because people were hoarding gold and cash. Hoarding, they said, was preventing money from circulating. If citizens could be persuaded or forced to move that gold back into the banking system, credit could be restored, confidence rebuilt, and the economy revived. That was the story. The deeper reality was more cold-blooded. As long as citizens and foreign governments could demand gold in exchange for dollars, the state's ability to inflate the money supply and fight the depression was limited. The gold standard was a leash on political and monetary power. In the spring of 1933, that leash was cut. On April 5, 1933, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates. The language was dry, even dull. The impact was anything but. The order required all persons, individuals, corporations, partnerships, to deliver most of their monetary gold to a bank or Federal Reserve facility by a specific deadline. In exchange, they would receive paper dollars at the official rate of $20.67 per ounce. After that deadline, holding gold beyond small exemptions was a criminal offense. The penalty made the point. Violators faced up to $10,000 in fines and up to 10 years in prison. In an era when many workers were lucky to make $1,000 in a year, that fine wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a threat to destroy someone's financial life. There were exceptions, and they matter, because they reveal what the order was really targeting. People could still own gold used in industry, professions, and the arts, dentists, jewelers, certain manufacturers. There was a small personal allowance. A limited amount of gold coins could be retained. Rare and unusual coins with special collector value were also exempt. Your wedding ring, your grandmother's locket, your decorative jewelry were not the focus. The real target was monetary gold, the coins and bars and certificates that formed the backbone of the financial system, the direct bridge between paper promises and physical metal. That bridge was being dismantled, one forced handover at a time. If you spend enough time around gold enthusiasts, you will hear exaggerated stories of government agents smashing their way into homes and prying coins out of floorboards. The truth is more subtle and, in a way, more troubling than that image. The main weapon of enforcement was not the policeman's knock. It was the banking system itself. Banks were ordered to stop redeeming notes in gold and to report large holdings. Businesses that legitimately used gold had to apply for licenses. Transactions in gold were tightly restricted. The entire institutional architecture pushed gold in one direction, from private hands toward official vaults. There were prosecutions. People who tried to move large quantities of gold offshore, who openly defied the order, or who engaged in smuggling, did face the courts. But for the average person, the message was transmitted less through raids and more through headlines and fear. Newspapers printed the penalties. Officials spoke of hoarders as if they were sabotaging the recovery. In a time when so many were desperate for work and food, the idea of risking prison over a handful of coins was enough to push many into compliance. At the same time, not everyone obeyed. Human nature didn't suddenly vanish in 1933. Many Americans quietly disobeyed the order, burying coins, hiding them in walls, passing them down out of sight. The law turned their savings into contraband, but it didn't erase their instinct to protect themselves. The effect was not to seize every ounce of gold in the country. It was to change the rules so that any gold outside official possession was always vulnerable, always subject to future crackdowns, always in the shadow of illegality. Executive Order 6102, however, was only the opening move. The real transformation came with the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. That act, passed by Congress in January 1934, did three things that fundamentally altered the monetary world. First, it transferred ownership of all monetary gold, including the Federal Reserve's reserves, to the U.S. Treasury. The central bank, in a very real sense, lost its gold. The metal now belonged directly to the state. Second, it ended the public's ability to redeem dollars for gold. The direct promise that had underpinned the currency for generations was severed. A dollar was no longer a claim ticket for metal. It was simply what the government declared it to be. Third, it gave the president power to redefine the gold content of the dollar. In less abstract terms, it allowed the government to change the exchange rate between dollars and gold by decree. Soon after, that power was used. The official price of gold was raised from $67 an ounce to $35. That doesn't sound dramatic until you do the math. The dollar was devalued by roughly 41% against gold. Every ounce of gold the government now held, thanks to the forced deliveries of the previous year, suddenly appeared far more valuable in dollar terms. On that revaluation, the United States booked a massive paper profit on its gold holdings. Those gains were not shared with the citizens who had surrendered their metal at the old, lower price. If a private trader convinced you to sell a valuable asset at one price, then immediately revalued it for his own benefit, you'd call it front-running. When a government does it, it's called monetary policy. The official justification for all this was macroeconomic. By increasing the dollar value of its gold reserves, the government could expand the monetary base. By devaluing the dollar, it aimed to raise domestic prices, reduce real debt burdens, and stimulate spending and employment. In theory, and to some degree in practice, this helped weaken the deflation that had strangled the economy. But a simple question remains: who paid the price and who reaped the reward? The losers were not hard to identify. Citizens who complied and handed over their coins at $20 in change per ounce lost the ability to participate in the subsequent rise in gold-S official price. Their gold stopped being their hedge and became the state's lever. Savers in cash and holders of fixed contracts also suffered. When a currency is devalued, debts become easier to pay in nominal terms, but savings lose purchasing power. Many contracts that had specified payment in gold or gold-equivalent dollars were effectively neutered. The legal system sided with the state EES new rules over the old promises embedded in those agreements. On the other side, there were clear winners. The U.S. government, the largest debtor of all, now had more flexibility to inflate away the real value of what it owed. The monetary authorities gained direct control over the national gold stockpile and more freedom to expand the money supply without the old gold constraints. Debtors in general benefited at the expense of creditors. Those holding real assets, land, businesses, commodities, and those who had managed, legally or otherwise, to keep some gold outside the system were better positioned than wage earners and small savers whose wealth was tied to fixed dollar amounts. This is the pattern that repeats again and again through financial history. Use a crisis to justify extraordinary measures. Change the rules of the game. Take real assets or real options away from the many and hand back paper promises that can be diluted, adjusted, or redefined when convenient. There are myths worth clearing up. It's not true that gold was banned in every form. People still wore rings, bought jewelry, and in some cases held rare coins. The key was control over monetary gold and over the convertibility of paper into metal. It's also not true that every citizen complied. A significant amount of gold remained in private hands, quietly hidden and passed down, but always with a sense of risk attached to it. Over time, the strict controls relaxed. By the 1970s, Americans were once again legally allowed to own gold bullion. But by then, the system had moved beyond gold entirely. In 1971, the United States closed the gold window internationally as well, ending the dollar's convertibility for foreign governments and central banks. The last formal link between the world's reserve currency and gold was severed. The experiment that began with domestic confiscation in 1933 ended with the birth of a fully fiat monetary order. Why does any of this matter now? Because the deeper lesson of 1933 isn't about metal. Yes, about the nature of monetary promises and the behavior of governments when those promises become inconvenient. Every financial system, no matter how sophisticated, rests on trust. Trust that money will hold value, that contracts will be honored, that rules won't be changed overnight. When that trust begins to fracture in a crisis, those in power face a choice. They can allow the system to adjust within the old rules, even if that means painful defaults and restructurings. Or they can rewrite the rules to protect the system and their own position inside it. In 1933, the decision was to rewrite the rules. The state asserted that the need to save the economy justified overriding individual property rights in gold. It took real assets at a fixed price, then changed that price to its own advantage. It suspended contract clauses that promised payment in gold. It redefined what a dollar meant. The tools today are different, but the logic is unchanged. Central banks no longer need to confiscate physical gold to control the money supply. They use interest rates, asset purchases, and digital entries on their balance sheets. Savers are penalized not by threats of prison, but by negative real rates and silent inflation. Discussion of central bank digital currencies opens the door to programmable money, where transactions can be monitored, steered, or even blocked at the code level. In each case, the pattern is the same. When the system is under strain, the priority is to protect its continuity, even if that means moving the goalposts for ordinary people. The gold confiscation of 1933 is a reminder that what is legal and what is just are not always the same. It shows that property rights, even in something as fundamental as money, are not immutable. They can be reshaped or suspended by decree, especially when fear is high and the public is told there is no alternative. It also shows something else. Systems that seem permanent are not. The dollar, once advertised as good as gold, ceased to be a gold promise within a single generation. Citizens who trusted that definition found it rewritten over their heads. Those who understood the pattern of history were less surprised and often far better prepared. Every crisis is, in the end, a transfer, from those who trust the system's promises blindly to those who understand the mechanisms behind them, from those who hold paper claims to those who hold things the system cannot print, from passive savers to active students of history. The question is not whether the rules of money will change again. They always do. The question is whether, when they do, you will be standing on the side of blind faith or informed awareness. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.